Just because something exists does not mean that it's real. So, let's talk about how standards are set. Let's talk about authority. And let's talk about how you live your life. And let's do it through the lens of forks. Look at this. Types of forks. Oyster fork, fruit fork, cheese fork. I don't know the provenance of this particular image. I came across it on Twitter, posted by someone who is not the person who added their name onto just under the title there. That's some chef, I think, in India. I'm not sure. But let's examine this, because we're going to learn a lot about the nature of the world through this image. Okay. So there is a lot about how we live our lives that we probably need to examine more deeply. Why do we do things the way that we do them? So when we look at all of these forks and all of these specialized forks, it's important that we not sell our souls. For example, look at that last fork, a snail fork. Now, it's true that many escargot eaters do use some sort of tiny two-pronged forky fork to pull the snail out. But you know what's also super, super common? Toothpicks. People eat escargot with toothpicks. And many escargot dishes don't even, the snail isn't even in the shell anymore. It just really depends on the preparation. But okay, so that fork is, it's pretty real. Or if you're given a crab. I mean, I've never seen anyone use a crab fork. But I suppose if you need some delicate, long instrument to reach in there. Now, here's the thing, though. Ask yourself, if someone brought you some deep-fried tarantula, which is a thing, or some king crab, creepily similar. Arachnids, delicious. Are you going to pull out the old crab fork, or are you simply gonna crack and slurp? Right? Look at that oyster fork at the top. Have you ever seen anyone eat an oyster with a fork? I mean, sometimes I've pulled them out with a regular fork because the places I was at, not all sawdust places, for the record, gave me an oyster fork. What we're looking at here, and usually, of course, you slurp, right? That's the sound of eating oysters. Cheese forks. Well, what kind of cheeses are we talking about? Because I can think of a lot of cheeses that would not benefit from the use of an implement of that design. But of course, if you search for cheese fork, you're going to find things that look exactly like that. Look at that spaghetti fork. That's the liar. That's the true liar in the group. Spaghetti fork. What is that? I said to myself. So I looked for spaghetti fork. It was hard to find this particular fork because it's hard to get through the whole should we use a spoon when we eat spaghetti debate. So this is an actual product. Whoever put this together is likely, I think, associated with the designer of this. It's called the Forgetti fork. Oh, look at it. And it's trying to put itself in the middle of all of these bourgeois forks. Now, when I say bourgeois, what I mean is the striving, uncouth middle class. And I don't use it to mean the rich. I mean it to describe the middle malcontents. Okay? So this fork is a product. that people will just want you to buy. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I'm going to end up talking about Emily Post here. And remember, we're talking way in the back, we're talking about the nature of the cosmos and your place in it and how you live your life in it. So we're going to talk about Emily Post. But before we do that, here's the thing I want you to really meditate on. If you ever get to the point where you come to a party with a multitude of forks, and you don't know what the expectation is, and you are afraid to ask, and you're afraid to laugh, you're afraid to make a mistake, you have already strayed from the path of righteousness. You're betraying what God has given you, and you are betraying, honestly, what is best. Because what is best is not following what some people say is real. Just because it exists doesn't mean it's real. Did you know that Emily Post taught that the proper way to eat spaghetti was with a spoon, the whole fork and spoon method? Now, if you go and look that up online now, you will find some Italians defending it, particularly Southern Italians. But they have to defend it because actually, the normal way of eating spaghetti is with just a fork. Just a fork. And not a forgetti. Oh, man. What an unfortunate name, huh? Don't forget your forgetti. All right. Now, the problem is when people like Emily Post and people who teach etiquette classes start thinking that there's some sort of a standard. Now, of course, the good ones are not going to be like, oh, you have to live this way. But they do tend to teach it like this is something to be striven for. When in fact, I think the greater beauty is freeing oneself or even just relaxing, right? Of sitting down at a table at a party or with a family and saying, oh, there's a spoon by my spaghetti. What is this for? Ha ha, oh, look what you do. Oh, that's fun. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to do that too. Is there a better principle of good manners? So I didn't grow up around, etiquette rules and Emily Post, but I received a sort of British idea of how to handle cutlery. Okay, so my mother was educated in a British school. And I didn't realize it. I'm not sure she even realized it. But as I grew older, I realized that our whole family had been doing things in this vaguely British way. So, for example, the way I handle my knife and fork, the way I cut, all of that is more in the British style than the American. Perhaps we don't even know that there's a tendency of how Americans handle their forks and how Brits do. And that's fine, right? That's good. But whatever. So I was raised that way. And I am a bit finicky sometimes, right? I'm still ashamed of the reaction I had when I was 9 years old, and there was a very poor girl. This was in Brazil, and there was a very poor girl who lived on our street, whose parents basically neglected her. She lived at the end of the street, so kind of in a shack at the end of the street. So we had all these nice houses on our street, but then her and her family, and I never saw her parents. So anyway, she was my age. And my mom had her in the house and fed her. And she ate, and she grabbed her fork like this, which is something that upsets me. Maybe you do that. And then she started shoveling the food into her mouth, and she was just, the way she was masticating, it was just, her mouth was wide open. And even at this age of 8 or 9, I was ashamed of how I felt inside. I was disgusted. I thought it was gross. And, so I've repented of that, but I still, it was a true and visceral reaction. And I'm telling you that story because obviously I'm the jerk in it, right? Okay. Now that you've accepted that I'm the jerk. When people eat spaghetti with a spoon, that's disgusting to me. Okay. Now, I'm not going to write a book about it, and I'm not going to make a video advocating for the not eating of noodles with a spoon. What I'm trying to tell you is that neither Joffrey the Giant nor Emily Post get to tell you how to eat spaghetti. Now, if you want to see how a Neapolitan or a Sicilian eats their spaghetti and their other noodles, and you want to just sort of imitate that, or, oh, that's cool, that's great, go ahead. You can also eat spaghetti how you want. You could even gasp and you could even cut your spaghetti with a knife and fork. I'm not going to be the one to tell you no. But I'm also going to tell you that if you are at a party or a dinner, and you know that most people consider it uncouth to cut your spaghetti with a knife and fork, it's your responsibility, if you know that, not to cut your spaghetti with a knife and fork, but to just be cool. Oh, hey, I'm gonna hang out with you, and I'm gonna do it the way you do it. Okay. But again, the most important thing is to realize that most of these things are arbitrary, and so they don't have the sort of reality that is authoritative, right? If the weather is a certain way and you go out, you are going to get sunburned. How you decide to act under the sun is up to you, but that's how it is, right? But there are a lot of things that they don't get to say. And that's what I wanted to kind of make the second part of the video about, which is that there is no they, right? This forgetty, the makers of these memes, the people who think you have to eat snails with a snail fork, they're not real, and their power is not real. Which you're probably thinking, well, that's, you're just talking about forks, so I'm totally on board. But are you totally on board? Are your kids in government schools? Why? Like, who has the right to educate your kids? What obligations and responsibility do you have in the education of your kids? What kind of work do you do? How do you dress? How do you eat? How do you talk to people? How do you live under the sun? Well, hopefully, it's not following a bunch of rules that they made and believing a bunch of stories that they told. Now, I'm not advocating a lifestyle of rebellion and restlessness. Rather, I'm asking you to live a lifestyle of trust, a life of trust and faith, which requires knowing who they are. The they behind the spaghetti fork are merchants who want you to buy the only spaghetti fork ever made, as far as I can tell. They say there's a spaghetti fork. Now, as it happens, it's morally indifferent as far as I'm concerned. It would be fun if someone got in the comments and actually argued for the morality for or against. But I'm going to say, I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's morally indifferent whether you buy this spaghetti fork or not. But it's not morally indifferent whether you know who they are and how they are speaking into your life. You are responsible for yourself and for your family as a Christian. Do you know who they are? Do you know why you're living the way you're living? Why are you eating the way you're eating? Why are you reading the way you're reading? Why are you watching the way you're watching? Why are you playing the way you're playing? Why are you exercising the way you're exercising? Why are you talking the way you're talking, etc.? I mean, I think this examining everything will take you to a lot of weird and radical places. I mean, I almost embarked on another part of this video of the the things that I'm kind of a crazy person about from a, like, say, my in-laws' perspective. From the perspective of the bourgeois. And yes, I am an avid capitalist who uses the term bourgeois negatively. Because, yeah, I mean, there is a sort of, it used to be that we understood that it was principally the nobility that had time for leisure. And there was only the rich and the nobility and the poor. As the middle class begins to grow, then you have more and more disposable income. Nearly all of us are rich by human standards today. Under crushing poverty, the unexamined life is, I mean, all you can really do is get up, work, and go to sleep. Take care of those very basic necessities. But you have so much leisure time. But your leisure is lazing, right? It's not true leisure. It's not, because leisure actually produces. Leisure is when you get to make the beautiful things. So yeah, I use the term bourgeois to refer to those who have the riches to behave nobly and instead behave ignominiously, cravenly, who are eager to know what the correct fork, what the correct monkey suit is. There is no they. Know who you trust. Know who you have faith in. Know who your authorities are. All right. I would love to hear feedback from you guys. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this whole "there is no they" thing. I'd love to hear what you think of the reality thing, right? Just because they say that something is or that something exists doesn't mean that it's real. And I'd also love to hear fun stories of the bourgeoisie in which you perhaps did choose the wrong fork. And I beg you, if you're here at the end as I close, not to think less of me for thinking less of you if you eat spaghetti with a spoon. So, time to stop the confessional, time to end the video. The peace of Christ be upon you all.
What day is it today? Remind me.
It's Sunday, Mr. Pench.
Sunday. And what do we do on a Sunday morning, wherever we happen to be? We go to church, you bloody heathen!